Big Bend National Park in the U.S. state of Texas has national significance as the largest protected area of Chihuahuan Desert topography and ecology in the United States. It contains more than 1,200 species of plants, more than 450 species of birds, 56 species of reptiles, and 75 species of mammals. The national park covers 801,163 acres. A variety of Cretaceous and Cenozoic fossil organisms exist in abundance, and the park has artifacts estimated to be 9,000 years old. Historic buildings and landscapes offer graphic illustration of life along the international border in the 19th century. For more than 1,000 miles, the Rio Grande Rio Bravo forms the international boundary between Mexico and the United States, and Big Bend National Park administers approximately 118 miles along that boundary. The park was named after the area, which is bounded by a large bend in the river and Texas-Mexico border. Because the Rio Grande serves as an international boundary, the park faces unusual constraints while administering and enforcing park rules, regulations, and policies. In accordance with the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo, the park's territory extends only to the center of the deepest river channel as the river flowed in 1848. The rest of the land south of that channel, and the river, lies within Mexican territory. The park is bordered by the protected areas of Parque Nacional Canada Santa Elena and Maderas del Carmen in Mexico. Geography and climate. The park exhibits dramatic contrasts, and its climate may be characterized as one of extremes. Dry and hot late spring and summer days often exceed 100 degrees Fahrenheit in the lower elevations. Winters are normally mild, but sub-freezing temperatures occasionally occur. Because of the range in altitude from about 1,800 feet along the river to Emery Peak in the Chisos Mountains at 7,832 feet, a wide variation in available moisture and temperature exists throughout the park. These variations contribute to an exceptional diversity in plant and animal habitats. Some species in the park, such as the Chisos owl, are found nowhere else in the United States. The 118 miles of river that form the southern park boundary include the spectacular canyons of Santa Elena, Mariscal, and Boquillas. The Rio Grande, which meanders through this portion of the Chihuahuan Desert, has cut deep canyons with nearly vertical walls through 3 uplifts made primarily of limestone. Throughout the open desert areas, the highly productive Rio Grande riparian zone includes numerous plant and animal species and significant cultural resources. The vegetative belt extends into the desert along creeks and arroyos. South of the border lie the Mexican states of Chihuahua and Coahuila, and newly protected areas for flora and fauna, which are regions known as the Maderas del Carmen and the Canada Santa Elena. In 2012, the park was named as an International Dark Sky Park by the International Dark Sky Association, which recognized the park as one of only 10 places in the world certified for dark sky stargazing. In addition, the association recognized the park as having the darkest measured skies in the lower 48 United States. On many nights, park visitors can look up to the night sky to see thousands of stars, bright planets, and the clear outline of the Milky Way band. Astronomers, both professional and amateur, are seen on many moonless nights gazing up at the stars through portable telescopes. Geology. The oldest recorded tectonic activity in the park is related to the Paleozoic marathon orogeny. Although Proterozoic events possibly have some deep control, the marathon orogeny is part of thrusting of rocks from the South American plate over the North American plate. This can be best best seen in the Persimmon Gap area of the park. This orogenic event is linked to the lack of Triassic and Jurassic age rocks in the park. Between the Triassic and the Cretaceous, the South American plate rifted from the North American plate, resulting in the deposition of the Glen Rose limestone, Del Carmen limestone, Sioux Peaks Formation, Santa Elena limestone, Del Rio clay, Buda limestone, and Boquillas formations. Also during this time, the Chihuahua Trough formed as the Gulf of Mexico opened, which resulted in east-west striking normal faulting. As a result of this depositional time, dinosaur, forest and other fossils are preserved in the park. Following the ending of rifting in the late Cretaceous to the early Cenozoic, the Big Bend area was subjected to the Laramide orogeny. This period of compression caused the northeast-facing Mesa de Anguilla, the southwest-facing Sierra del Carmen Santiago Mountains and the Tornillo Basin. During the Middle Cenozoic, most of the volcanic rocks, including the Chisos Group, the Pine Canyon Caldera Complex, and the Burro Mesa Formation, formed. The most recent tectonic activity in the park is basin and range faulting from the Neogene to Quaternary. This period of east-west extension has resulted in estufa and dihalobolsons in the Chisos Mountains, as well as the Tolingua and Sierra del Carmen, Chalk Draw, and Burro Mesa faults. The Rio Grande has entered the Big Bend area roughly 2 miles, and since then, extensive erosion and downcutting have occurred. Human history. During the early historic period, several Indian groups were recorded as inhabiting the Big Bend. The Chisos Indians were a loosely organized group of nomadic hunters and gatherers who probably practiced limited agriculture on a seasonal basis. The origin of the Chisos Indians is not known. Linguistically, they were associated with the Conchos Indians of northern Chihuahua and northwestern Coahuila. The language group spoke a variation of Uto-Aztecan, a language whose speakers ranged from central Mexico to the Great Basin of the U.S. The Jumano was a nomadic group that traveled and traded throughout West Texas and southeastern New Mexico, but some historic records indicate they were enemies of the Chisos. Around the beginning of the 18th century, the Mescalero Apaches began to invade the Big Bend region and displaced the Chisos Indians. One of the last Native American groups to use the Big Bend was the Comanches, who passed through the park along the Comanche Trail on the way to and from periodic raids into the Mexican interior. These raids continued until the mid-19th century. The last of the great military leaders of the native peoples of the region was an Apache of Spanish ancestry named Alzert, who was active as late as the late 1860s. The European presence in the region begins circa 1535 AD with the first Spanish explorations into this portion of North America. The expedition of Alvar Núñez Cabeza de Vaca passed near the Big Bend and was followed by other expeditions. Some of these expeditions were searching for gold and silver, or farm and ranch land. Others, such as those by the Franciscan missionaries, were intended to establish centers in which the natives could be evangelized, in an attempt to protect the northern frontier of the New Spain, from which emerged present-day Mexico. A line of presidios, or forts, was established along the Rio Grande in the late 18th century. The Presidio de San Vicente was built near present-day San Vicente, Coahuila, and the Presidio de San Carlos was built near present-day Manuel Benavides, Chihuahua. Some of the presidios were soon abandoned, because of financial difficulties and because they could not effectively stop Indian intrusions into Mexico. The soldiers and settlers of these presidios presidios moved to newer presidios where the interests of the Spanish Empire were more defensible. Such was the case of Santa Rosa Maria del Sacramento, now Musquiz, Coahuila. Very little study has been made of the Spanish occupation of the Big Bend following the abandonment of the presidios. In 1805, a Spanish settlement called Altas existed 30 miles south of the Rio Grande. The region became a part of Mexico when it achieved its independence from Spain in 1821. Mexican families lived in the area when English-speaking settlers began arriving following the secession of Texas during the latter half of the 19th century. Following the end of the Mexican-American War in 1848, the U.S. Army made military surveys of the uncharted land of the Big Bend. Forts and outposts were established across Trans-Pecos, Texas to protect migrating settlers from Indian attacks. A significant proportion of the soldiers in the late 1800s were African American and came to be called the Buffalo Soldiers, a name apparently given to them by the Native Americans. Lieutenant Henry Flipper, the first American of African ancestry to graduate from West Point, served in Shafter, Texas. Near the end of the 19th century, ranchers began to settle in the Big Bend about 1880, and by 1900, sheep, goat, and cattle ranchers occupied most of the area. The delicate desert environment was soon overgrazed. In the late 19th and early 20th century, the valuable mineral deposits were discovered and brought settlers who worked in the mines or supported the mines by farming or by cutting timber for the mines and smelters. Communities sprang up around the mines. Boquilas and Talingua all resulted from mining operations. During this period, the Rio Grande floodplain was settled by farmers. Settlements developed with names like Talingua, Abajo, San Vicente, Locaita, and Castolin. Often, no more than clusters of families were living and farming in the same area, and they were successful only to the degree that the land was able to support them. In the 1930s, many people who loved the Big Bend country saw that it was a land of unique contrast and beauty that was worth preserving for future generations. In 1933, the Texas legislature passed legislation to establish Texas Canyons State Park. Later that year, the park was redesignated Big Bend State Park. In 1935, the United States Congress passed legislation that would enable the acquisition of the land for a national park. The state of Texas deeded the land that it had acquired to the federal government, and on June 12, 1944, Big Bend National Park became a reality. The park opened to visitors on July 1, 1944. Flora and fauna. Despite its harsh desert environment, Big Bend has more than 1,200 species of plants, over 600 species of vertebrates, and about 3,600 insect species. The variety of life is largely due to the diverse ecology and changes in elevation between the dry, hot desert, the cool mountains, and the fertile river valley. Most of the animals are not visible in the day, particularly in the desert. The park comes alive at night, with many of the animals foraging for food. About 150 cougar sightings are reported per year, despite the fact that only 24 cougars live in the park. Other species that inhabit the park include coyote, kangaroo rat, greater roadrunner, golden eagle, gray fox, collared peccary, and black-tailed jackrabbit. Mexican black bears are also present in the mountain areas. The variety of cactus and other plant life add color to the Big Bend region. Cactus species in the park include prickly pear, claret cup, and pitaya. In the spring, the wildflowers are in full bloom and the yucca flowers display bright colors. Bluebonnets are prevalent in Big Bend, and white and pink bluebonnets are sometimes visible by the road. Other flowering plants such as the desert marigold, desert willow, ocotillo, rock nettle, and lechugilla abound in Big Bend. The first U.S. record of the northern tufted flycatcher, a Central American species, was from this site in November 1991. Birders also flock to the park, as it is home to the only area in the United States within the breeding range of the Colima warbler. Plans to reintroduce the Mexican wolf to Big Bend National Park were rejected in the late 1980s by the state of Texas. Disagreement over the reintroduction included the question of whether the park contained enough prey animals, such as deer and javelinas, to sustain a wolf population. Tourist information. Big Bend is one of the largest, most remote, and least visited national parks in the lower 48 United States. In recent years, only 300,000–350,000 visitors have entered the park annually. Big Bend's primary attraction is its hiking and backpacking trails. Particularly notable among these are the Chimneys Trail, which visits a rock formation in the desert, the Marufo Vega Trail, a loop trail that passes through scenic canyons on the way to and from the Rio Grande, the South Rim Trail, which circles the high mountains of the Chisos, and the Outer Mountain Loop Trail in the Chisos, which incorporates parts of the South Rim Loop, descends into the desert along the Dodson Trail, and then returns to the Chisos Basin, completing a 30-mile loop. Other notable locations include Santa Elena Canyon, Grapevine Hills, and the Mule Ears, two imposing rock towers in the middle of the desert. Professional backpacking guide services provide trips in the park. The park administers 118 miles of the Rio Grande for recreational use. Professional river outfitters provide tours of the river. Use of a personal boat is permitted, but a free river float permit is required. In June 2009, the Department of Homeland Security began treating all float trips as trips that had left the country and required participants to have an acceptable form of identification such as a passport to re-enter the country. Visitors often crossed the Rio Grande to visit the Mexican village of Boquilas, but the Department of Homeland Security closed the border crossing in 2002. In April 2013, the Boquilas crossing reopened as an official Class B port of entry between the U.S. and Mexico. It is open Wednesday through Sunday between 9 a.m. and 6 p.m., with more than 450 species of birds recorded in the park. A widely popular activity is bird watching. Many species stop in the park during their annual migrations. 5 paved roads are in Big Bend. Persimmon Gap to Panther Junction is a 28-mile road from the north entrance of the park to park headquarters at Panther Junction. Panther Junction to Rio Grande Village is a 21-mile road that descends 2,000 feet from the park headquarters to the Rio Grande. Maverick Entrance Station to Panther Junction is a 23-mile route from the western entrance of the park to the park headquarters. Chisos Basin Road is 6 miles long and climbs to 5,679 feet above sea level at Panther Pass before descending into the Chisos Basin. The 30-mile Ross Maxwell Scenic Drive leads to the Castellan Historic District and Santa Elena Canyon. For out-of-state visitors who wish to visit Big Bend, flying into Midland, Odessa and then renting a car is the best option available. As a side note, it is a good idea for tourists to purchase tents, gear, and food, snacks in one of the large cities near the airport, as the small towns around Big Bend are not equipped with everything a campy will need. However, a well-stocked grocery is open in the town of Study Butte near the western entrance to the park. Gallery. Bibliography. Gomez, Arthur R. Amos. Singular Country, A History of Occupation in the Big Bend. Charles Redd Center for Western Studies, Brigham Young University. Jameson, John R. The Story of Big Bend National Park. University of Texas Press. Maxwell Ross A. The Big Bend of the Rio Grande. A Guide to the Rocks, Landscape, Geologic History, and Settlers of the Area of Big Bend National Park. Bureau of Economic Geology, University of Texas.